Are you looking for more out of your life? Do you need ideas on how to start new businesses and how to move forward in your own personal life? Well, guess what? You have come to the right radio show. At You Can Overcome Anything podcast show, you will learn and hear from many people from all walks of life who are sharing their challenges, their stories, the habits, and the mind shifts they had to overcome to become who they are today. On top, you will get a chance to connect and see how you can overcome anything by networking and learning about your next move through this radio show. I present to you our great speakers at You Can Overcome Anything podcast show with your host, Cesar Espino. Hello there, and welcome back to another episode of You Can Overcome Anything podcast show. It is your host, Cesar Espino, and today I have a special guest. His name is David Kincaid. He is a former U.S. civil nuclear trade analyst and diplomat to Indonesia who has lived, visited, and worked in more than 50 countries. His life has included being forced out of his family and religious community in his 20s, leading to a period of homelessness, followed by rebuilding into a career in international trading. After struggling with addiction and deep personal misalignment, he chose to step away from that path to create a more aligned life. Today, David works globally as a coach, helping people navigate major life decisions and identify crossroads with clarity, honesty, and self truth. What's going on, my friend? How are you, David?
I'm doing fantastic, Caesar. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, definitely interesting journey that you have here. And before we dive into that, tell me a little bit about, because I think this is really where it begins, right? Tell me a little bit about your upbringing and where are you originally from?
Yeah, so I'm from the United States. I'm from Florida, and I grew up I was a suburban white boy in the 1970s,
Yeah.
and it all looked really good. And then somewhere along the way, I understood that I was gay,
Mhm.
and that didn't start looking so good. I grew up in a very conservative area.
Right.
I was a
And
Southern
I would say
Baptist.
more so
Yeah,
back then it wasn't really accepted more, I mean, more so than today. Even today still a
right.
challenge. I would say back then even more, right?
Absolutely. I was kind of envious of people today in that community. I'm like, wow, boy, they have it a lot easier.
Well, I think nowadays everything is easier, right? Like I remember growing up right now, even something as simple as we didn't have internet. We didn't have, my first
Right.
phone was a flip phone, or, different things, right? So everybody has it easy now.
Yes. Love it.
Good, good, good. So okay, so you weren't accepted, so tell me a bit about that because obviously, at the age of 20, right, for you to kind of be, in a place where what did I do now? Like, what's next for me, right? And not being a part of an acceptance there, and leading to homelessness. That's huge. Even somebody getting out of their teens and early younghood into that. How was that for you?
Yeah, it's interesting. It actually happened to me in my mid 20s, and oftentimes people kind of choke on that because I think that they think, "Oh my gosh, why couldn't you have just like handled all that yourself?" But the thing is like back in those days, the mental drain of being in a community that did not accept me, I really didn't progress much from the time I was in high school to that point in time. I'd also gone to a Baptist university. They asked me to leave. My family asked me to leave. My church actually had a petition against me and
Hmm.
asked me to leave. And so that was my entire community. That was how I understood my belonging in the world. And so to have all that just like slowly over a series of years disappear, I had a few suicide attempts. I went to, the Beat the Gay Out, Exodus International.
Hmm.
And that was very difficult. And, I had a lot of guilt. And, it was all about like how I was wrong and living the wrong life and all this kind of stuff. And I truly believed that about myself. And so, I remember, walking away from the situation in which I was made homeless. And I remember just thinking, I have no idea how to face the world this way.
Mm.
Right. I like that had never been in my imagination about the future was that I'm penniless. and without food and without shelter. Like how does one actually manage that kind of a situation?
Yeah.
So that's how I kind of landed there.
Yeah, and kind of going back to that, I like what you said here is your life isn't waiting on better circumstances, is waiting on a decision and the courage to trust yourself enough to make it. And I think you probably
Yes.
were positioned with that too, right? Because again, I think there's essentially two different scenarios in this case. One would be you're gonna let your community, society, right, take the best out of you and really just take you down, and or you're going to what I like to call surrender, not to give up though. Surrender to understand that this is my norm, this is who I am, this is what my life is gonna be, and so I'm going to surrender to accept and also to take action and do something different and take my life to a different level, right? And so talk to me about that process because I think a lot of
Mm,
people, regardless of their religion or their sex classification, any of that, right? A lot of people are falling into something very similar like what you went through and are stuck. They don't know how to get out of that. They don't know what did I
yeah,
do next.
yeah. I love that you're talking about this point, and I've come to several different surrender points in my life before I really understood that that was part of the process.
Mm,
And I think that surrender. I call it what I kind of borrow this from Byron Katie. She talks about like the war on reality. And there was a moment when I turned to prostitution briefly to get food and just to get gas into my car. So because I was trying to find a job and I thought maybe I could like go get a restaurant job. And ultimately, what I did is I realized I have to put aside all of who I believed myself to be.
mm,
And I have to be humble enough to walk into this Boys and Girls Club and say, I would be willing to paint the inside of this room if you could give me some food and a place to sleep on the floor.
mm,
Right. And that changed my destiny. Right. Because then now I'm engaged then I was engaged in the process of moving forward. Right. There was a brief time there where I was just like wallowing in the horror of it all, and it was horrible. Like that's a very violent space to be in, and especially for somebody who is a pacifist. Who I mean, I didn't really play sports or anything like that. I
mm.
wasn't like an athletic kid or anything, so I wasn't out there fighting for myself. I was just beat up, and so to change my destiny by simply just saying I need help.
Mm.
I need to rely on another human being to help me move forward. And I'm willing to do what it takes to do that. So what is that? Right. So just that presentation, that question. And I think that in today's world, we see that over and over again because we want to shift the blame to something else. But no, there's about accepting what is. And then from that place of peace, now you can have decisions that are actually valuable. Because when you're in a place of turmoil, your decisions are about turmoil.
Hmm.
When you're in a position of hate, your decisions are about hate. But when you're at peace and love, your decisions are about peace and love. And so that's the future you're building.
Yeah. You said two things that are, I think, so critical even right now when I see people also struggling. And the first one is kind of what you're saying. You were turning to what you thought it was a solution, but really it was just kind of getting by. You were still in that. You had that hat of a victim, right? Or this is
Mm,
happening to me, right? And
yeah,
and not until you decided to say, hey, what about if I change my habits or change the outcome of what I'm doing to something that is going to help me progress and move forward, right? Because the other stuff is, yeah,
that's
you were
right.
getting by. You were just doing whatever you were doing just to get you by, but there was no progress, right? It's like, I did it
Yeah,
today. I got to come back and do it tomorrow. And I know a lot of people that are stuck
exactly.
in that place, right? Exactly.
Yes.
And so it's like, what can I do to actually move forward, even if it's an inch, as opposed to going back to that? So I love the fact that you talked about that because I think that's huge. And the second thing is that you mentioned is you being able to say, hey, I need help. Now, coming to that, from your perspective, how do you see that now? Again, going back to our
Mm,
current society, social
yeah,
media, there's so many people watching you, and sometimes even asking for help, right, might be a sign of weakness or might be a sign of, they're just gonna laugh at you and bully you, and because of social media, right? You see that a lot.
Right. So all that is just a story in our minds,
Mm,
right? It's just a story about that. And it's not the actual thing. And a story is kind of like a road sign. It's like, you're coming up to New York City and you see the big sign that says New York City this way. Well, the sign isn't New York City, even though it's
mm,
printed on there.
yeah.
The sign is just pointing you in the direction of New York City. And so when we see inside ourselves, oh, I don't like it when that person says that, then we have to pull back a little bit and look inside our minds and see what is it we're reacting to. Because otherwise, we polarize ourselves. We say, okay, I got to shut that out. And now we're creating distance. And human beings are fundamentally designed to be connected.
Mm,
There's no way around that. In fact, we know from past evidence that when human beings are completely disconnected, that leads to death. Human beings cannot survive simply by themselves,
yeah.
right? Not because we're incapable, not because we're weak, but because by sheer design, we are built to be connected. This is where love is. This is where the frequency of the universe is. This is where all of the benefits come from and our ability to evolve and move forward. And currently, we're in a polarized world, and it doesn't matter if you're left or right. I don't care.
Hmm.
If you are engaged in the war with one another, you are engaged in the act of disconnection,
Mm, yeah.
right? And there's a place to let down all of that stuff and say, how about we get on the same side? And I'm going to get on your side just for a moment. Doesn't mean I have to believe your point of view. Doesn't mean I have to accept your point of view, but just to be able to be with you in that moment as a human being.
Yeah, no, I love that. When do you started working on yourself, right? I believe that there's two different things that people do, right? Number one, I can work on my outer self, work on the muscles and kind of like my outlook. But deep down inside, you might be broken, right? And a lot of times
Yeah.
that's what, society gives you. And so many people, I would say, or most people, do not know how to work on the internal aspect, on your inner self.
Yeah.
And I know that you've done a lot of that work. So when did you
Yeah.
kind of discover that that is the way to go about it? Forget about what people see on the outside, right? It's more deep down.
Mm.
And when you discover that, when did you start working to it? Because obviously, you've done amazing. To be able to live in over 50 different countries and have all of these different accolades, that's huge.
Yeah.
I think it really comes down from working on yourself, your mind, and working through that stuff.
Yeah. Great question. I think that most of us are born with the desire to understand ourselves, and society kind of beats it out of us. I
Hmm.
remember running out of my room one day as a child, and I said, the question of who am I is the most important question. And, of course, my parents thought I was crazy. And for a while, I had to put aside that thinking because I moved into survival mode. And so you're right. And so I continued that as I came out of homelessness and began to get myself on my feet again. Later, I moved into a career in the federal government and as a diplomat. And so I know, so at some point in Jakarta, in Indonesia, I saw these beautiful, beautiful people all around me in Indonesia, happy as could be and poor as could be. And I was like, I'm not happy and I have everything.
Mm,
And I came to a crashing point and I was like, you know what? I'm going to return to those old questions
yeah.
because this is no longer working. The climbing the ladder, the status, I have it all. And none of it is fixing the dark hole that got formed inside of me. And so I need to do that. No one's going to do that for me. And so I went on my own journey. I went on a tour. I went around the world for a year. I walked the Camino de Santiago across Spain. I re-engaged my spiritual self, which I'd put on the back shelf because I couldn't deal with things like church and
Hmm.
what does that mean and God and Bible and all that stuff. I couldn't reconcile all that at that time. And so I returned back to it very consciously. And over the last 7 to 8 years of my life, I have been extremely diligent in pursuing that. And I am here today and I return to that statement, the question of who am I? You exhaust all other questions when you continue to pursue this question. And it's not a selfish question. What is selfish is not to take care of you, because when you don't take care of you, you force the rest of the world to have to do it for you. That's a burden, right? When we get ourselves handled, then we are filled to overflowing with things to give the world, right? But first, we have to investigate those questions. And so that's a terrific question you've got there. It's
Yeah.
amazing.
No, yeah, I love that, and I don't think there's ever an ending, or maybe there is, asking that, and the reason why I say that, I think, we as human beings, we always have to be evolving, right? We have to be doing something. You often hear people that retire, right? And I don't know the statistics, but people that retire and they don't have either the connection that we talked about, right? Somebody to connect
Yeah.
with, and or they feel like there's nothing else for them to do, that literally their days or years really condense. And you hear a lot of stories that a few years after they retire, they passed away because of the same reason.
Yeah.
They're lacking that
Yeah.
connection. They're lacking the motivation, or well, okay, maybe for so many years my identity was to go to work and do this day in and day out, right, in that
Mm,
rat race.
yeah.
Now I came out, I don't know who I am anymore. I don't know what to do. I don't know what's next for me. And so I do believe that we have to continue to ask that question. And if we reach that point, maybe, okay, well, what will be my future self then? And what's gonna be that future self that I need to go after? Would you agree with that?
Yeah. I would. And, it's interesting because, I think that so many of us, we fall victim to this illusion that I just got to hold on to what I got. Right. But I promise you, just like the leaves on the trees, if you sit still and do absolutely nothing, change is still going to happen.
Mm,
Right? You cannot avoid change. So any effort to avoid it is wasted effort, and it creates war with reality again, and there starts suffering. Instead, we need to embrace this change and embrace that we are developing and morphing and evolving, and it's not linear, right? So the
mm,
place where I get really like careful here is that we can in the West we are so accomplishment oriented,
right.
right? But we have everything, but we've lost touch with it inside. And so this is where my work with my clients comes in, is like really going back inside and going, how do I get back in touch with the essence of what is truly me? How do I find my groove in this crazy world that we're involved in, so that I can ride the flow of the river through this change, through this evolution, throughout the course of my life?
Mm, yeah, yeah. I definitely see that, and I agree with you. And I'm originally from Mexico, and was born in Mexico, came into the States a couple of years later. And one thing that I can see the difference, right? Definitely blessed to be here. And it goes back to your point. Like, we are so, money driven, and doing all these different things here, which is nothing negative with that. But we do lose a little bit of that, because sometimes when I go back home, right? Just like when you were, traveling, and you see family, or friends, and they have nothing to show for, but it seems like they're enjoying their life even much more than what I was or I am right now, right? Because I feel like that they have that sense. They haven't lost that, right? And whether they have money or not, whether they're poor or not, whether they have a house or they don't have a house, I see them always in this unity, and it feels different, right? And that's one thing
Yeah.
that even me myself, I go back and start reflecting, and thinking, there's something missing here, right? There's something missing here. And once you can put both those things together, I do believe that you can have a happier, longer life. Because you said it before, like you've seen cases of people that have millions of dollars, and you hear in the news, and they committed suicide because there's something missing, right? The money isn't all.
Yeah.
It is important, but I don't think it's all of it. So I do agree with that. I think I like the idea that you work with your clients on going in deeper into what is that inner aspect of that.
Yeah. Well, that's that inside world, outside world. It's like, we're trained through socialization, through our families, through education, through job searches, all throughout our lives. We're trained to focus out there. There's always something. There's like, you have to get married, and you have to get a degree, you have to get a job, then a house, and then children, and then they have to leave. All this process. And none of that is true.
Yeah.
If you want to do those things, then by all means, they're an option available to you, but do so with joy and do so because you choose it, not because it defines you,
Mm.
right? Like we can have all kinds of wealth and money. I don't have a house because I don't want a house.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
I don't want to mow a yard. I don't want to do maintenance. I don't want to have a mortgage. I don't want to have assets. I want to be able to move around because I love people. And I love discovering the planet, and the planet's way too big for me to discover in my lifetime. So I got to get a move on.
Yeah,
You know what I mean?
exactly. Yeah. Yeah. No, I love that. And so I love that you have to find what makes sense to you and what works for you and what's gonna bring that joy, right? I definitely love that. That's something that I think many of us need to do, even in the worst circumstances, right? Because I think that
Yes,
that's who's gonna define, how can I go from being miserable or having a bad day to finding joy and happiness, even in the moments that
that's right.
you don't have that, right? Um,
That's right.
Talk to me about what kind of so tell me a bit about your program or how do you work with your clients?
Yeah, so I'm running a program, for example, right now at the end of April here, and I call it the Inner Pilgrim. And it's really for people who have done all the reading, they've done all the podcasts, they've listened, they've watched all the videos, and they're like super awakened. At least they think they are,
Okay.
but they haven't really found the joy piece of it. And this applies to so many people. How many professionals are in their jobs, and they did all the schooling and they got like their top grades, and they've been performing at work and they are so great, and it just doesn't quite fit what they think should fit.
Hmm.
And so they often hide that. And so the way I work with people is I work through a lot of somatic psychology. So I move into the body. Like I call this our dashboard. I
Okay.
get people like reconnected with what are the signals that your body is giving you? What are the thoughts that you're actually focused on and allowing to be a part of your progress in life? And these are professionals and people at the crossroads. And I help them to get clarity at the crossroads to make the big decisions of their lives and then to land in those decisions without having to burn the house down.
Mm. Yeah. Now it's are your is your program, this particular program or any of the other programs that you might have, are they tailored to the person, or is it kind of like a period of time, of a program?
Yeah, great. So this current program is 2 months long, and it's a
Okay.
group of people, and it's a subject driven. So it's this inner pilgrimage inside of each other. I also have one-on-one clients, and all of my one-on-one client packages are all tailored and
Gotcha.
custom designed to that particular individual.
Yeah.
And it can vary wildly. Like I have a lot of experience in international trade and living overseas, and I've had clients who are interested in just understanding how can they do that? How can they
Mhm.
create businesses overseas? How do they access the outside world in a way that's meaningful and isn't as frightening as it seems?
Right. Yeah, because I mean that definitely I can see that being, I think more so now there's a desire of being able to do stuff or travel and see the world and do that. Except again, people might have the fear of how did I do it and how did I make it work? How did I make money? What does that mean, right? I'm sure there's a lot of questions that come with that. I know if that were me, I would have those questions for sure. So,
Can I jump? Can I jump in? Can I jump in on that? That is
yeah.
so wonderful. And what happens right there is that the people have this imagined life that's different than the one they're actually living, right?
Mm.
And so I call it the gap.
Hmm.
And so I help them resolve this gap, right? Like maybe they feel like that they're in the wrong career, they're living in the wrong place, they're with the wrong spouse, right? But they lack the clarity and also the courage, right? Because they're not clear, so
Mm.
they have fear running the show, and so we get behind that fear and we just bring that fear down so that they can become confident in the decisions that they are making to create a future that is much more aligned with who they are.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. Tell me a little bit about in terms of what has been maybe one of your biggest um, experiences of becoming who you are, right? The person you are right now. Because I think, again, we're always seeking and looking and searching of making our best version. But what is one of your biggest experiences, and what were some of the things you had to do to become the person that you are now?
Yeah. I think the biggest decision that moved me in that direction was resigning from being a diplomat to Indonesia, so the foreign service.
Yeah,
And I mentioned before, just coming to a breaking point, and I can remember coming home to my apartment, and I mean, you got to imagine I have a three-bedroom, two-bath apartment in a high-rise condo in Jakarta,
yeah.
and I fall on my face in tears, and I just said, I can't do it this way anymore.
Mm,
And I had to become ready to lose everything in order to move forward. And I got ready for that. And I was prepared for that. And that meant status, right? Like people in the embassy thought I was crazy, right? Who resigns from the foreign service? People retire in the foreign service. There's tens of thousands of people
yeah,
that apply for those jobs. I had to give up a steady income. I gave up being paid to travel the world and having my travel paid for by the American taxpayer, which was kind of a problem for me.
hmm,
And I I had to be able to do it myself,
mm,
right? Nobody was going to rescue me. I was going to rescue me. I was living, I had a lot of addictions going on in the background. And I was not in integrity, and integrity is a big deal for me. And I wanted to be aligned with myself. And so it took a really serious coming to terms. And it didn't happen overnight. It took probably a year and a half to 2 years for me to really settle into how profound that decision actually was for me. And I'm so thrilled I made it.
yeah,
I am absolutely, that was absolutely the right thing for me to do at that time. And I'm so thrilled I was in the Foreign Service. It brought me to that place. And so it was a perfect design all along. And each step each step since then has just been about evolving this person that I am and learning and discovering it more. And I hope to never stop discovering
yeah.
until the day I die.
Yeah, I love that. And let me ask you this, because I call it the taking your leap of faith, and that's how I define that, because I think it is that you're betting on yourself. And I did something very similar when I decided to become a full-time entrepreneur. It took me about 8 months going back and forth on the decision, and finally saying, "Hey, I'm gonna leave this over six-figure paying job and good job and all this stuff. I'm just gonna leave that all behind." Um, was it? Do you think it's more preparation, or is more exterior preparation, or internal preparation, mental preparation?
100% internal preparation. It's a mindset. I had an awareness one day come over me that just left me laughing in tears because I suddenly realized I can't mess this up. There's no way to mess this up because there's no prediction for how it's supposed to go.
Mm,
So, however it goes is marvelous. And if I land up homeless again, how marvelous to have that experience. If I become super wealthy, how marvelous to have that experience, right? It's mine to create here,
mm,
right? This is the being still in the stillness, right? Being aligned with myself and what is, and I can't mess it up.
yeah,
There's
yeah,
no failure.
yeah. That's
We
huge.
all land up in the same place, by the way, right?
Yeah,
We all land up in the grave.
right, exactly. Yeah, exactly. But you know what? You said something, and that's huge, because you're right. We're thinking about, we're painting a future that we don't know if it's going to happen. We don't know if that's going to be the future, right? And again, you're right. That decision could have taken you either way. Just like if you stay in that job or in a place you're not happy with, you don't know where it's going to take you, And so it's still kind of like a one for one bed, right? That's the first thing. The second thing is, at least for me, it was really just that decision. It was, I just came to terms, and I found out that a lot of times it is not that we're afraid of the decision, right? Or the outcome of the decision. We're not afraid of that. What we're afraid of is making the decision, making the commitment. Because once we say, hey, yes, I'm going to do this, that's what we're afraid of, the aftermath, right? And so I tell
Mm.
people all the time is like making the decision is not the hard thing. The decision is going to be either you're going to do it or not, right? But getting to that place to where you're going to actually pull the trigger and do it, that's the hard part. That's where people do not
Yeah.
move forward.
Yes, and I love working right there in that space. Because this whole thing about imagining the future. So
Hmm.
think about that. So when we imagine something, we generate a thought in our head that is projected into the future about what we anticipate happening. But what a controlling thing, because we control all of the variables.
Mm.
We control the weather in that imagination. We control other people. We control the economy. We control politics. We control the entire planet inside of our head. And then we actually expect the real world to perform like it's in our head. And there is so much suffering in that space,
Mm.
right? Instead, when you start to change your thoughts and you're like, what is it about this future that is so appealing to me? And how can I be that? Not do it. How can I be that right now?
Yeah. There's an African proverb that I really like, and it says, "When there's no enemy within, there's no enemy outside that can do you no harm." And we got to get to that place where within you, you're all in a place of love and joy, and everything outside is gonna fall into that place because that's what you're living, that's what you're thinking, that's what you're embracing, right?
That's right.
Um, and
That's
so I
right.
love that. Um, David, tell me a little bit about where can people find you? Where can they connect with you? Where they can learn more about what you have going on?
Yeah, sure. I like to direct people first to my website at David Kincaid, DavidKincaid.us, or they can get me on Instagram at Coach David Kincaid. And then I'm also on Facebook under David Kincaid.
Awesome. I love that. You're giving us a lot of great, what I call golden nuggets, a lot of great information. I want to see if I can get a couple more out of you. Number one is, what do you, I mean, you're very active. You're all over the place. Obviously been through so many different countries, different cultures, different things. What is one thing that you do to kind of keep you up and going every day? Do you have any what Tony Robbins would refer to as rituals or daily habits that you must do
Mm.
every day to kind of get you up and going?
Yes, I used to really reject these things because my father was very regimented and I hated that.
Yeah.
And so I rejected that, but I came back to his wisdom. And mornings are a very powerful time. We awaken into the day with our minds unguarded, and so often whatever fears or anxieties often plague us in the morning. And I've talked to lots of people; they often
Mm.
find themselves 4, 5, 6 o'clock in the morning in some hole of depression. And the way to go about that is to create a morning ritual that is so lovely and inviting into the day. And I do a lot of breath work
Okay.
where I just deep breathe and I get myself really anchored in my body. And I start telling myself from the very beginning of the day, David, I just love you so much. I just love you so much. Because when love starts there, then it pours outward, right? And the day begins to look different. The actions that you have to do that day begin to look different, and your decisions look different.
Yeah, I want to add something to that. I think that's huge, and that is not easy to do. When you tell
Yeah.
yourself, "Hey, David," or "Hey, Caesar, I love you," and I remember going through my journey and also my journey of growth and just really working on my mind, and I would say that, and it felt very uncomfortable. It felt like I cannot do this, and literally the way I overcame that is I started looking at myself in the mirror and I say, "Hey, Caesar, I love you. Caesar, you are the best." And I will say these things, and I
Yeah.
still do to this day, because I do believe that sometimes we're waiting for this external validation or somebody else to
Mm,
come and tell you this, when in reality, the one you want to hear from is yourself. And you have
yeah.
to be able to talk and see yourself in the eye and tell this, because that's when you get very deep into that. So I do agree with that. I think that's huge. Not easy, yet you have to do it. I think something that you have to do to get you going.
Yeah. Well, back in the 80s, Saturday Night Live used to run that whole like Stuart Smiley, and they were mocking this whole like toxic positivity is what we call it today.
Mm-hmm.
But there's a real truth underlying that as well, because you know what? Your brain is trained to hear one voice above all sound in the entire universe, and that is your voice.
Mm.
And so when you speak the words out of your mouth, your brain is listening and it believes everything you say.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so if you're telling it that you're a piece of crap, well, that's what it's going to believe. But if you're speaking words of love, then that's also what it will believe.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. My last question for you is for the people that are watching us and or listening to us, if they're going through any challenge, whatever challenge that might be, what is one thing or a few things they can do to start overcoming that challenge?
So I think that anytime that you begin to see, I call them the neon lights. The neon lights are like the road signs, and they're usually like complaints, judgments,
Mm.
right? Anger that you're lashing out at others, things that cause you fear, whatever that thing is that sparks that negative emotion inside of you, stop for a minute, judge it fiercely. That jerk, that person's doing that wrong. And then take that statement and begin to just sit there with that and ask yourself, what is so important about that for me? What do I want in me? Because it brings it back into you, right? We're very keen on being polarized with politics right now. There's a lot of complaints there. It's a beautiful space to work. So when you notice that outrage and you notice that fear, ask yourself, what is it in me that needs resolving? Because that's where it starts. What are the thoughts that I'm having about that thing?
Mm.
And so just bring it back into your body and find a safe space to do it, right? Anchor yourself. This is the earth. I am welcome here. Right? I can face these difficult questions because people will find the scariest questions of all are the ones inside.
Yeah. Wow, I love that. David, thank you for everything you have to share and for being here. Really appreciate all of your wealth of knowledge. Any last minute things you want to say before I let you go?
No, I really appreciate this conversation. I love some of the questions you asked. They're terrific, and I love that you gave me a chance to talk about this inside outside world and those kinds of things. So thank you very much, Cesar, for the opportunity.
Yeah, no, definitely. Well, I definitely thank you for being here. And for the rest of you guys, that is David Kincaid. Make sure that you guys go and connect with him on Facebook, Instagram. Go check out his website. And do me a favor, make sure that you share this message because definitely somebody has to hear it. And I'll see you guys at the next episode of You Can Overcome and the podcast show. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Cesar Espino, real estate investor, business coach, and consultant, and author of the book, You Can Overcome Anything, Even When the World Says No. My number is 424-501-6046. In my book, I talk about making the necessary changes to shift your mind for prosperity and certainty. Pick up your copy at Amazon. I also love helping families with their real estate and can purchase your house fast and all cash. Follow me on Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn. My number is 424-501-6046.
Thank you for having me today. I am so glad you've tuned into this podcast. You can find me at your favorite podcast platform where you can like, subscribe, comment, and share. And to learn more about myself, my services, you can find me at www.cesarrespino.com, or you can also find me at your social media. Thanks for joining me, and I am looking forward to having you at the next episode. And know you truly can overcome anything.